I put out a tweet earlier that said, it's 2.5 years in the making of this class. I was wrong on that. Going back to Griffin Little, it's about 3.5 years actually, going back to his freshman year. But it's been good. We're excited. We're proud of the guys that signed today. It's been an interesting year, a challenging year for a number of different reasons. See those guys be able to celebrate and sign and see their dreams come through. We're excited for them. We'll have 6 guys that'll be here in January, about a month and a half now, that'll enroll early. We'll get those guys on campus and get going. We have 2 linemen, Connor Colby and David Davidkoff, 2 receivers, Arlen Bruce and Keegan Johnson, and then 2 linebackers, and Zach Tweet and Justice Sullivan. So I know those guys are chomping at the bit to get here. Overall, just the class, every year we put an emphasis on, we try and find multi-sport athletes. We try and find leaders. We try and find winners. We want humble, selfless, hardworking guys. And I can't speak enough about this class. It's been exciting. They've stuck through it in the long run. We were fortunate that we had a good bulk of our class early on before the pandemic really hit, and we kind of got some momentum going in March and in the spring there. And working off momentum, I think, is really important, especially in a year like this where we haven't had guys on campus for 9 months now. We won't have guys on campus for about 13 months at the current end of the dead period. We'll see if that stays put. We certainly hope so. It'll be good to get guys on campus as well as you guys yourselves. This is a weird format here. I feel like I'm interviewing for a job of some sorts with the setup. But, overall, it's been a good year. We're really, really fortunate to have a strong regional base. As you guys can see from the geographic areas, we had 16 of our 17 guys that are either in state or within touching states, which is one guy that was, about a 7.5, 8-hour drive, depending on how fast you're going. So very different from years past. We're really fortunate that the geographic base was strong for us, and we kind of capitalized on that. So with that, I'll open it up to questions for you guys.
Okay, first question, Mark.
Hey, Tyler, you've maybe seen a lot of these types of stories over the years, but I noticed on Jaden Harrell's Twitter today, he posted a picture of the letter that he wrote himself when he was 8 years old, saying, that his goal was to earn a scholarship to Iowa, and he posted a picture of his first time at Kinnick with his dad. How cool is it to kind of see those types of things, these guys that have wanted to be Hawkeyes for so long, and specifically with him, I guess just how cool is that to bring him on board after, he sets that goal all that time ago?
Yeah, it's awesome. It's I have a different vantage point in terms of my relationship with these guys before they get to campus, once they get to campus, as they finish. It's always incredibly humbling, and I don't cry as much as Coach Ferentz, but you tear up at times when you see guys come here. I don't watch senior day for a reason, because you go back 5 or 6 years and you see these guys you remember when they're high school and their parents, and you see them sign, and you see them after 4 or 5 years fulfill their dreams of playing high level football and ultimately, hopefully having a chance to move on to the next level. And it's, I have nothing to do with any of that. I really don't. That's all the coaches that develop these guys when they get here and develop those relationships and push these guys to be the best football players and people they can be. But it is, at the end of the day, we've got 9 guys from the state of Iowa in this class, and 9 guys that probably grew up Iowa Hawkeye fans. And I've seen some of those pictures of some of these kids in their Iowa jerseys at Kinnick when they were little kids. So for them to fulfill their dream is incredible. But then watching them run out in the swarm for their first time in Kinnick, every year I try and go over there for the first game on Thursdays or Fridays when our guys go in there and they see their locker set up for the first time, and just how excited and giddy they are. And they're on the phone with their parents or their girlfriend, whoever it may be. That's pretty incredible. It's a feeling that's hard to describe, and it's good for these guys. They've earned it. They've earned it.
What do you like about Jaden specifically?
Jaden was a guy we offered, early. Jaden's a physical kid on both sides of the football, extremely productive, a really humble, kind of quiet kid. Which you sometimes you like those linebackers that are a little bit quiet and they get on the football field and wreak havoc. And from a program that's been a successful program that we know a lot about. And, he grew up an Iowa fan and from day one kind of made it known where he wanted to be and eventually ended up making the call. And we're excited about that.
Thanks, Tyler.
David?
Yeah, Tyler, first of all, congratulations on the class. I'm sure a bit of a relief for you that all the kids have already signed, the ones that are supposed to. I apologize for a bit of a loaded question, but just how important was the the in-state class, just in terms of establishing that foundation? And when did you know the 2021 class in Iowa specifically was going to be special? I mean, it seems like the state's churning out more and more talent than ever.
Yeah. First and foremost, thanks for the congrats. It's always, I know it's probably boring for you guys and everybody else, but when it's uneventful, that's great. That's what we want. It's easier to sleep last night not knowing that there's anything in the fold. But it's good for the state of Iowa. It's good for the kids in Iowa. It's good for the high school football in Iowa to get the recognition they deserve. And not every year is going to be like this year. This is probably a very historical year in the state of Iowa. But there's kids that can play football here, and it's good to see that they've got recognition from the Big Ten and from some of the kids in the state all across the country, and even some of the lower level schools, and getting some of those guys. I'm not sure on how many guys signed today, but it's good for those guys. And I've said it before, and I think it was a huge advantage for us to have this type of regional base in a year where there's a pandemic, where we can't have kids on campus and we can't go out and see them, and we can't have summer camps. Everybody is well aware that we're big in terms of evaluation and getting kids on campus for camps. It's huge for us to get guys on campus and actually see campus, see our facility, interact with the support staff around campus that they're going to be part of in their everyday life once they get here. So, with the state of Iowa having the base we had, with us having 6 guys already committed before the 2020 calendar year started, it was huge. It was huge to have those guys and just the base built, and to have those guys help you recruit, the next guys in line. I've said it before, if we had 1 or 2 guys at that point when everything got shut down, that might have been a little hairy. That might have been a little sticky. But to have 6 guys committed and then pick up another, 7 or 8 guys in the spring and build some momentum and have those guys help you recruit. Not to take anything away from our coaching staff. They do a great job. Anybody else, but nobody recruits as well as high school kids. Nobody recruits as well as peers. And when you've got guys on board that want to help you recruit, understand who you are, and can reach out to those kids, that's a really powerful thing.
Tyler Devine.
Yeah, Tyler, you mentioned, Griffin Little. You guys were after him really early. I mean, what's the challenge in keeping guys committed or interested when you are after them as freshmen and sophomore, and you got to, keep them interested for 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, I mean, we don't offer many freshmen. Some of these sophomore offers they're going out a little bit more from us, but we're still probably not on par with the rest of the country. You got to be really special, and we've got to be really sure that when we offer somebody that young. And then at that point, it's strategic. If they're able to get on campus, what do you start with? You don't want to throw everything at a freshman or a sophomore right away, unless you absolutely have to, unless this might be your only shot. But the way recruiting's worked out today, and just how many kids get on campus, how often it happens. Now we've learned a lot about virtual recruiting and what we can showcase from a distance too. You got to have a plan put in place. And with Griffin, it was interesting. He comes from a great program. Pat Anger was actually one of the first guys to tip us off on Griffin. And when you play football at Bettendorf as a freshman, that's something to take notice of. Strong wrestling background. Dad wrestled here. 2 dogs named Kinnick and Carver. I mean, they were all in. But it's tough. And some schools want to get their name in the ring earlier with kids, and we have to at times. But we also want to find a way to formulate a plan on, hey, if we do this, what's our plan moving forward? How can we keep this guy engaged, and how can we strategically recruit the guy over a 2.5-year period? Because after 2.5 years, if you're still chasing a guy who's not committed, it might get a little bit stale. And then once you eventually do earn a commitment, then it turns into, hey, we got to get you guys to help us turn into recruiters, right? You committed to this place for a reason. Help us tell these other kids and their parents, and the parents get involved too. You guys probably see that some of our parents are extremely active on social media, which is good, and then they're willing to help out and kind of share their experience as well.
Mike?
Tyler, can you walk me through the process of Alec Wick? I know it was a pretty late preferred walk-on right down the street. You got that connection with Marv and Ed. But, a guy who didn't necessarily get a lot of looks from some bigger programs, but certainly had a heck of a career there down the street. And kind of what do you see, his future role being?
First and foremost, I don't think you can ever underestimate production. Right? When you're productive, whether you're walk-on or scholarship or whatever level you're at. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure he is the all-time leading receptions leader in Iowa high school football history, right? Over Oliver Martin, who is a heck of a football player. I think TJ Hawkinson was on that list. So And sometimes recruiting it's not an exact science, right? Guys get looked over for one reason or another. We knew about Alec. Coach Cook had reached out about 2 years ago to say, this is a guy you probably want to keep on your radar. He got hurt 2 years ago in the playoffs, missed a little bit of time, and then had just a monster senior season. And then when you got a guy like Ed Hinkle and just all the contacts that we have at Regina, and for those guys to stand on the table about what type of football player he is, and then when you get to watch the state playoffs and you see what he did in the state title game, I mean, come on, for us to be able to get Alec as a walk-on, that's just incredible. And he's a good kid, unbelievable soccer player as well. It'll be fun to get him here and let him battle, and you never know what's going to happen.
Chad?
Hi, Tyler. I've got 2 questions, if you don't mind. First of all, on the wide receivers, did you find it, I guess, a little bit after the Holiday Bowl, et cetera, like a little bit easier to recruit skill position talent to this class? Or not, I know it's not easy.
Yeah, I mean, the guys definitely took notice. There's no doubt about that. They definitely took notice of that, and it's we've always had a stigma, right? You guys hear it all the time. We run the football. We have big O linemen, right? We don't throw it. If we do, it's the tight end, so on and so forth. I think the past couple of years have shown different. We'll throw it all over the place. We'll run it. It's game plan is going to change by week based on who we're playing, what their strengths are, so on and so forth. But it certainly helps, and I think you could ask, all 3 of those guys, seeing the success that Brandon and Amir had, and Tyrone and Nico last year, it's probably appealing to them. It's probably appealing to them, and it's good. And it's, all 3 guys have a little bit different recruiting stories, and just in terms of how they were found and what they can bring. But all 3 guys are hungry. We initially talked about taking 2 guys. We had 2 that kind of jumped on board. All 3 guys were already talking behind the scenes with each other without telling us. They kind of all already knew that they wanted to come. So it made it a little bit easier when we got to that 3rd guy and let them know, hey, this is where we're at, what we want to do, what do you think? And they never flinched. They never flinched, and they've been solid the whole time through. And it'll be fun to get them all here. Brody's a big, 6'4", 205-pound skill guys don't grow on trees in the state of Iowa, right in your backyard. We knew about Brody for a while. He's a big kid that can run, a really good multi-sport athlete, good ball skills. Probably fits more of the mold of that outside X receiver, if you will. And then you look at Arland, who was in Kansas and had an unbelievable junior year at his high school, where he was a Wildcat quarterback. And talk about production. I mean, there was nobody more productive in the state. And when Coach Copeland had mentioned him and found him, it's like, what are these other schools doing in state? They're not even messing with the kid. And I think, fast forward, you see him come up to Iowa this year and play at Ankeny, and you saw what he did after he won his appeal. I mean, he's just lightning in a bottle. I mean, this kid is dynamic. He's a Swiss Army knife. He can play in the backfield, in the slot, return punts, kicks, play defense, had the game-winning, interception in the semis. So, and then you look at Keegan, who, Keegan's interesting. Obviously, his dad, 2-time national champion at Nebraska. We were actually watching him in the room that I'm in right now during scout school. It was right after his junior year, and we'd popped him on, and obviously offensively you liked what you saw, but what really stuck out to me was there were a couple of clips on defense where he comes up and just wallops a couple of guys. I mean, just smashes these guys. And to see that from an offensive skill player, like you love seeing that, right? And that was, to me, that was the selling point. And as we research him further and figure out who his dad is, say, all right, we're going to end up offering this kid, great, he's probably going to go to Nebraska. We're wasting time. But then you get him on campus and you really get to know him and his dad. And Coach Copeland did an unbelievable job developing that relationship. And that's a huge credit to him. But the more you get to know Keegan, it was his decision. He wasn't going to be pressured to stay in home. And I mean, it speaks volumes. When your dad played with the head coach there, who was a 2-time national champion, you're arguably the best player in your state, and you're leaving the state to come to, one of your most hated rivals. I mean, right there, I think that tells you everything you need to know about Keegan Johnson.
Great. And then following up right along those lines, I mean, Kirk mentioned that Keegan's dad had some questions after the events of June. How did you, what kind of messages did you send to guys that had those questions? And obviously you kept this class together for the most part since June.
Yeah, I mean, with the whole class, we had to be open and honest, and there were conversations similar to the conversations that took place in this building with our current players. You couldn't run away from it. You had to hit it head on, and it's a huge credit to the class to stick with us, listen to our staff, listen to the players here. A lot of those guys talk to current players in the building, current coaches in the building, and I think that just shows you the type of kids we had. And within that, they talked within each other too. These guys have group texts. you know, they're talking all year long and kind of helping recruit each other. And this is what was said. This is what was said, keeping this class intact.
Tyler Devine.
You mentioned having 6 guys in this class at this time last year. You stood at 1 in the 22 class right now. Can you attribute that to anything other than the eternal dead period due to COVID?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably part of it. It's probably part of it. You know, I think initially right now, just looking forward, next year is going to be a smaller class than normal anyways. And then when you throw in the extra year for our seniors too, you know, it's our roster is as fluid as it's ever been right now with just everything taking place with the NCAA, the potential extra year, the transfer portal, which is, you know, news that you guys see every day that continues to just fill up with kids. So, and again, last year when you go back and we had 6 guys, you know, how many of those guys were from the state or really close too, you know, and not saying this 22 class won't be the same as the 21 class in state. We've got a pretty good number of offers out in that 22 class, but we're not able to get these guys on campus the same way we were with the guys last year as early and often. You know, it's the 21 class. I feel really bad for them. They got robbed of some time to get on campus, but this 22 class, I mean, they're going to go 13 months in an extremely pivotal time of their recruiting period where they're not going to be able to get on campus and see places, camp, have our coaches out to see them compete. It's going to be challenging. It's definitely going to be challenging, but I think now more than ever, we have to be patient. We've really got to be diligent about who we're looking, how we're looking, and what we're trying to identify.
Jeff Johnson.
Yeah, Tyler, just Connor Colby and David Koff are listed identical size. Obviously, they're tackles. Are they, you know, their strengths as players, are they very similar in that way? And also, what position, like, do you ultimately see Cooper DeJean playing? And is that great that he has that kind of versatility where you can put him potentially at different places?
Sure. You know, Colby and David Koff, they might be, you know, same height, same weight. David Koff never rocked a mullet the way Colby did for about a year and a half. So he's missing out on that there. But I mean, no, those are prototypical tackle body types that you're looking for. You know, we're fortunate that one of them just happened to be down the road in Cedar Rapids. I mean, that's huge, and grew up wanting to be a Hawkeye, and it was pretty sought after too. You know, he may not get the national recognition that David Koff did just because he committed earlier, much earlier than David did. But then you look at David, who had, you know, he had a little bit of everybody in the country and different recruiting stories. But when David came here the first time, you know, almost 2 years ago for a junior day with his parents, you know, he told Coach Wallace, him and his mom told Coach Wallace just 2 days ago that, you know, the first time we stepped foot in the building, we knew this is where we wanted to be. You know, now it took another year of recruiting him and kind of sifting through the Ohio States and the Wisconsins and the Notre Dame courting him as well. But as we really got into spring recruiting and we really tried to switch our plan a little bit on how we had to virtual recruit and what our plan was going to be to try and, you know, keep this class moving forward. We felt really good about where we were with David, but, you know, ultimately it didn't come out of left field, but it came a little bit sooner than we thought when he called and wanted to commit. And when you get a guy like that who's come out and said his Final Four are Wisconsin, Ohio State, Notre Dame, and Iowa, that's going to, you know, these kids in this class, they're going to take notice that, hey, Iowa just beat some of these, you know, historical blue bloods, and that can get some of that momentum rolling. You know, we'll see if they're both end up being tackles here. I mean, I think ultimately long term, that's where we like them to play. But as you've seen, we've had some of our best tackles that started inside and then kicked outside after their first year. So it'll be good to get them both here in January, get them rolling, you know, fingers crossed that we actually have spring ball this year and get them a little bit of a head start in front of everybody else and going. In terms of Cooper DeJean, you know, I've said it a couple times today. I've got to give a shout out to my former next door neighbor who's from Oldie Bolt. He had actually told me about Cooper when he was a freshman and just kept talking about how great of a basketball player this guy was. And I quickly dismissed him and said, there's just no way there's a Division I football player in your hometown. I'm sorry. I apologize, Travis. You were right. I was wrong. But fast forward a year, you know, he's in his sophomore year playing basketball. And I remember sitting in my office with Scott watching him play basketball on his basketball highlights. And you see this kid that's, you know, a 6 foot, 195-pound kid just absolutely jumping out of the gym, right? I mean, you're not supposed to move like that when you're that size. Moving forward, he comes to camp as a sophomore as a receiver. Cooper did play receiver his sophomore year before moving to quarterback his junior and senior year. And he had a good camp. You know, he had a really good camp. He ran well. Measurements are great. As a receiver, probably just wasn't high up our board. So, you know, at that point, we kicked him over to the safety stack. And as we watched his junior year of football and week by week, just watch what he did on the football field and just take over games. I think it became pretty apparent that, hey, this kid he's built like some of the guys we've had success with in the secondary here. You know, how many high school quarterbacks have we had that have been really good DBs, under Coach Parker here? And then it really sealed the fate. I was actually fortunate enough to go out on the road last winter, and I went to one of Cooper's basketball games. And this kid, he's a pretty quiet kid by nature, good size, rocked up kid. And I think he had 4 or 5 dunks in that game, one of which he dunked over 2 guys, one that was about 6'5". And to see a quiet kid like that, once he stepped foot on the basketball court, just this flip just switched. To see him operate the way he did, and I was texting everybody on staff, like, this is a no-brainer. Like, this kid's an absolute no-brainer. We'll start him at safety. We think that's probably where his highest ceiling is. We'll see where it goes. But when you got a 4-sport athlete that's essentially all state in 4 sports and as decorated as him, it'll be fun to get him here and just kind of see what happens.
David?
Yeah, Tyler, we've been talking for a while, but we haven't even brought up the quarterback of the class. Joey Labus had a really interesting, I think, high school career. Went 0-10 as a sophomore. I think he had an injury, which is a big reason of that. Came back, won Conference Player of the Year. When did he first come on the radar? What did you guys like about him? And just sort of how did that relationship develop?
We knew about him last winter. Coach O's got the Cleveland area, so he had known about Joey. Probably didn't get real serious about him until, kind of early in the spring. And once the dead period hit, and then once it was extended the second time, it's kind of when we had to make a decision. Hey, we're not going to be able to get out and see these guys throw live in the spring. Unfortunately, they're not going to be able to come to camp. And we had a few guys on our board, and the more we just talked about Joey and his intangibles, he's a really good athlete now. When you watch his junior film, he's running around quite a bit. They didn't run him as much as senior year, probably just because he's such a good football player. They want to keep him healthy. But when you go back and you just watch those 2 years of film, it just kind of, verifies what you're looking for. He's a good athlete. He's a decent-sized kid, 6'3", 210 pounds, with a good arm. He's got great poise, and he's a little bit of a gamer. When stuff gets sticky, that's when he plays at his best there. So, having Coach O, having some familiarity with that area, Ricky Stanzi's worked with him a little bit as he works with some quarterbacks out in that area, and for Ricky to put his stamp of approval on him, I think that's kind of all we needed to hear.
Scott?
Yeah, there are a couple other offensive linemen you have, Bo Stevens and Jennings Dunker. Jennings was early, one of their first in your class, and Bo is very competitive in the Blue Springs area for some schools. What do you think of them, and where do they fit in?
Jennings is hilarious, first and foremost. I'm not sure if you guys, I don't know if we put them out on Twitter yet, but they're on Instagram. We did some Did You Knows with our guys and just asked 5 questions. And one of them was asking about their top 3 music artists. And Dunk's first response was Britney Spears, to which, I just replied, there's no way. And then he's actually got 2 Britney Spears shirts. So he said he was doing an interview in one of those today. I don't know if I'm supposed to say that, but we knew about Jennings just because, we had Isaiah Bruce in that high school. So we knew about Dunk early on. And we basically told him, hey, you're going to have to come to camp and earn it. And we kind of knew even coming into camp that we were going to offer him. And I'm pretty positive he committed before Coach Ferentz got the verbal offer out of his mouth. His family's from Iowa originally. He grew up wanting to be a Hawkeye. He knew right away that it didn't really matter who else was going to come. He was all in. And that's a small town. It's a small town, really small town. And that's credit to Coach Wallace for, when you recruit Illinois, people think, obviously you got Chicago, you have St. Louis, you have Central Illinois. But there's a lot of small towns too, and not everybody's willing to travel those roads. And I think it started with Coach Morgan back in his day, getting over to that western side of Illinois. And Seth kind of picked it up, and it's right on his way to Chicago. It's not right on the way; it's a little bit out of the way. But for him to dig him up and find him, and the more you find out about him, he's so freakishly strong. He's a really good athlete. In really well in that offensive line room. And then to Bo, Bo was a guy that we knew a little bit about, but when he came up to camp 2 years ago, that's where Bo really stood out to us, and at the time he's 323 pounds, and 323-pound high schoolers are not supposed to move the way Bo did. And we kind of knew after that meeting, hey, we want to offer him. And when he committed, we weren't really expecting it. We thought he may take it a little bit further. But you saw from that camp to where he is now, he wrestled for the first time last year. He cut down to 285. And now he's probably 295, 297. Looks like a different kid. And to have a high school kid be that disciplined to lose that type of weight, keep his strength levels, and he's just got a great attitude. He knows about the O-line tradition here. He's got a great relationship with Coach Polisek, and he's another guy that's going to be a really good fit in that O-line room.
How did you take Zach Tweed away from Iowa State, especially just a few miles outside of Ames?
Yeah, that's a big credit to Coach Neiman, actually. When Coach Neiman joined our staff, the first thing he wanted to do, he hit the ground running in Central Iowa. That was the first year we had really replaced Coach Morgan recruiting the state of Iowa. So, Jay had recruited the state of Iowa for a long time, obviously from the state of Iowa, but it was first time out with the Tiger Hawk on. So, he was, for the most part, going through schools, just, making sure he was, familiarizing himself with the coaches and where he was currently. And he had mentioned that, he thinks this Tweet kid might be interested. And we knew about Zach, but when he was committed to Iowa State, we kind of let it go. I know people think that we try and take their recruits, but that's not the case. We're pretty fair for the most part. But as we learned more about Zach and his genuine interest, we had Coach Wallace involved, and one thing led to another, and he's been such a good leader. He's a vocal kid. He's a great kid, another multi-sport athlete. And it'll be good to get Zach here. I don't know if there's anybody more excited about getting on campus next month than him, but it'll be good to get him here and get with our guys and get rolling.
Okay, final question, David Eichel.
Hey, Tyler, I know this is a little bit of old news, but I do want to get your perspective on it. How did you guys kind of, as a staff, sort of handle the whole Arlen Bruce in terms of eligibility? I got a chance to talk to him a few times, and he puts on a good front. He seems like a genuinely really good, sharp kid. But how tough were those conversations, and how'd you sort of help him just keep him grounded with those just that type of situation?
I mean, honestly, we didn't get involved. There's nothing we really could do. We're watching it from a distance. But I think it just speaks to Arlen, the type of kid he is, to stay humble about it. I don't know if the Patrick Mahomes tweet helped at all. That was impressive, though. I think that's 2 tweets he's had by Patrick Mahomes on his behalf. But for him to stay with it and stay engaged in that team and be a scout team guy and kind of wait patiently over something that, right, wrong, or indifferent, I don't know. Those appeal processes, that's way above my pay grade and something we just don't delve into. But it's such a weird year where some of these states were up in the air, and Illinois still hasn't played high school football, and some states voted 2, 3, 4 different times back and forth whether they wanted to do it. So for him to stick with it, and then when he had the chance to finally play and to see what he did to help that team win a state title, I mean, is impressive. I mean, it's most kids might have just given up, moved back home, and his high school team was playing at the point. By the time he got released, his high school team was already a game or two in, I believe. So for him to handle it the way he did and just have the maturity to do it, and then capitalize and be ready to go when his number was called, I think it just shows you what type of kid he is. And it was fun to watch. This is a fun year to watch. It's a different year where we have prospects all over the place represented in different teams, within the state playoffs. And you're rooting for everybody, but you're also rooting for success. And when you see him have the success he did and just kind of what he was able to do at the end of the year, that was pretty cool to see.